Have you ever noticed how often you blink? Most people don't, until someone tells them to think about it. Tonight, I want you to pay attention, because there was a girl who never blinked, and the moment someone noticed that, she noticed them back. I first noticed her on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning that feels so ordinary you never imagine it will follow you for the rest of your life. The sky outside was a dull gray, rain threatening but never falling, and the classroom smelled like old carpet and whiteboard cleaner. Students shuffled into their seats, backpacks thumping against desks, voices overlapping in meaningless noise. That's when I saw her. Third row from the back, seat by the window, perfect posture, hands folded neatly on the desk as if she'd practiced the position. Her eyes were already open when I walked in, wide, unmoving, watching nothing, or maybe everything. At first, she blended in, just another quiet girl. But something about her presence felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately name, like noticing a typo in a sentence you've read 100 times before. The class settled down, and the teacher began lecturing, his voice droning on about American history. I tried to focus, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. She hadn't blinked, not once. I told myself I was imagining it. People blink without noticing. Maybe I just missed it. So I started counting. 30 seconds passed, a minute, 2. Her eyes stayed open, glossy but not watery, fixed straight ahead. No twitch, no flinch. The fluorescent lights reflected in her pupils like tiny white scars. My stomach tightened. Human eyes aren't meant to stay open that long. They dry out, they sting, they react. Hers didn't. When the teacher called on her, saying her name, or what he thought was her name, she didn't respond. No movement, no acknowledgement. The room grew quiet. A few students snickered. Someone whispered something cruel under their breath. The teacher cleared his throat and repeated the question louder. Still nothing. She just stared forward, eyes wide, unblinking, as if she were listening to a voice none of us could hear. The teacher frowned, annoyed now, and eventually moved on. But I noticed something strange. He never wrote her name down, never marked her absent. It was as if his mind slid right past her existence. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, the kind you get when you've stared at a screen too long. A headache began to bloom slowly, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The longer I looked at her, the worse it got. I tried not to stare, I really did, but every time I looked away, the sensation got stronger, like an invisible hand pressing against the back of my skull, forcing my attention back to her. When I glanced again, her eyes had shifted, just slightly. They were no longer staring at the board. They were staring at me. I froze. The room felt suddenly colder, even though the heater was humming loudly. Her gaze wasn't angry, it wasn't curious. It was empty, like she wasn't looking at me but through me, studying something far behind my eyes. I waited for her to blink. I wanted her to blink more than anything I'd ever wanted before. My own eyes burned, tears threatening to spill. Still, she didn't blink. Not even when a loud bang echoed from the hallway. Not even when someone dropped a book behind her. It was like she was immune to distraction, immune to instinct. By the time the bell rang, my hands were shaking. Chairs scraped back. Students flooded into the hallway, laughing and shouting, the moment dissolving into normalcy. She stayed seated, still staring, still unblinking. As I passed her desk, I felt something I can only describe as resistance in the air, like walking through a thick fog that wasn't there. For a brief moment, I smelled something strange, old metal and dust, like a basement that hadn't been opened in decades. Then I was past her, heart racing, breath shallow, telling myself to stop being stupid. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something that made my blood run cold. I couldn't remember her blinking at any point during the day. Not once. Not when she stood up, not when she sat down, not even when the lights flickered briefly during third period. My eyes felt raw just thinking about it. I closed them, desperate for sleep, but the image of her face burned behind my eyelids. Wide eyes, unmoving, watching. And just before I finally drifted off, a single thought crept into my mind, slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly clear. What if she wasn't holding her eyes open? What if she couldn't close them? The next morning, I arrived at school early, hoping, irrationally, that the girl would already be there, blinking like a normal human being, laughing with friends, proving that my unease had been nothing more than an overactive imagination. The classroom was empty when I stepped inside. Rows of desks sat in perfect alignment, silent and waiting. I took my seat and stared at the third row by the window. Her desk was there, empty, normal. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me, followed immediately by disappointment I didn't understand. Part of me wanted proof that she'd been real. Students trickled in, filling the room with the usual noise. I watched every face carefully. When the bell rang and the teacher began class, the seat by the window was still empty. My heart started to race again. She hadn't just disappeared. That would have been easier to accept. Instead, it was as if the world had adjusted itself to remove her entirely. When attendance was taken, the teacher read through the list without hesitation. No pause, no missing name, no confusion. During a break in the lecture, I leaned toward the student sitting next to me and whispered, "Hey, do you remember the girl who sat by the window yesterday?" He frowned. "What girl?" "The quiet one," I said. "She never talked." He looked at me like I'd asked something deeply stupid. "Dude, no one sits there. That seat's been empty all semester." A chill crawled up my spine. I laughed weakly, pretending it was a joke, but my pulse was pounding in my ears. I asked another student, then another. Each response was the same: confusion, dismissal, mild concern. One girl even asked if I was feeling okay. It wasn't just that they didn't remember her. They didn't remember anyone ever sitting there. I turned my attention back to the desk by the window. The surface was clean, too clean. No scratches, no carved initials, no gum stuck underneath. It looked untouched, like it had never been used. But I knew what I'd seen. I could still picture her hands folded neatly on top of it, the way her fingers hadn't moved, the way her eyes had never closed. Halfway through class, the headache returned, stronger this time, a dull, crushing pressure behind my eyes. My vision blurred for a moment, and I had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. When I looked up, my breath caught in my throat. The seat by the window was no longer empty. She was there. No one else reacted. No one gasped. No chairs scraped. It was as if she had always been sitting there, and always would be. Her posture was the same as before. Hands folded, back straight, eyes wide open, unblinking. But now they were locked directly onto me. Not the vague, distant stare from before. This time, there was no mistaking it. She was watching me. I wanted to look away, but my body refused to listen. My eyes burned, screaming for relief. Tears pooled, spilling down my cheeks, but still I couldn't blink. It felt like some invisible force had taken control of my muscles, holding my eyelids apart. The room around her seemed slightly distorted, like heat waves rising off asphalt. The longer I stared, the more I felt something slipping, my sense of time, of place, of self. Then she tilted her head, just a few degrees, slow, deliberate. The movement was so unnatural it made my stomach twist. Human movements have rhythm, hesitation, imperfection. Hers didn't. It was smooth in a way that felt wrong, like a video playing at the wrong frame rate. Her lips parted slightly, and for a split second I thought she was going to speak. Instead, a voice formed in my head, quiet, calm, and unmistakably not my own. "You noticed." I gasped and blinked hard, breaking the connection. When my vision cleared, the seat by the window was empty again. The headache vanished instantly, leaving behind a hollow, dizzy feeling. The teacher continued lecturing as if nothing had happened. Students scribbled notes, unaware that my entire understanding of reality had just cracked open. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I checked reflections obsessively, terrified I wouldn't see my own blink. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt watched, followed, studied. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and forced myself to stare without blinking. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Pain flared. Tears streamed down my face. I blinked. The relief was immediate, and that's when I realized something that made my hands start shaking. Blinking wasn't just a reflex anymore. It was protection. I didn't go looking for the security footage right away. Part of me hoped that if I ignored what I'd seen, the world would reset itself, snap back into something I could understand. But the feeling of being watched followed me everywhere, in the hallways, on the bus ride home, even in my own room with the door locked and the lights on. I felt eyes on me, unblinking, patient, waiting. By the third day, sleep deprivation and fear had worn down whatever common sense I had left. I needed proof, something solid, something real. The school's security office was tucked away near the administrative wing, a place most students never had a reason to visit. I told the front desk I'd lost my backpack and thought I might have left it in my classroom. The lie came easily. The receptionist barely looked up as she buzzed me through. Inside, the air smelled like stale coffee and warm electronics. A single monitor on the desk displayed a grid of black and white camera feeds. An older man sat in a rolling chair, scrolling through footage with slow, practiced movements. I asked him if I could check the recording from my classroom. He raised an eyebrow but shrugged, pulling up the date and time I mentioned. The footage began to play. At first, everything looked normal. Students entering, taking seats, the teacher starting the lesson. My stomach tightened as the camera view settled on the third row by the window. The seat was empty. I leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. Minutes passed, still empty. "That seat's been unused for months," the man said casually. "Kids don't like sitting by the window. Glare bothers them." "No," I whispered. "She was there." He paused the footage and glanced at me, his expression shifting slightly. "You okay, kid?" I asked him to keep playing. Then, it happened. Halfway through the period, the image distorted. Static rippled across the screen, the picture warping like a corrupted file. The man frowned and tapped the monitor. "Cameras glitch sometimes," he muttered. But the distortion wasn't random. It gathered in one spot, the empty seat by the window. The static thickened, darkened, and then condensed. A shape formed. My breath caught as the figure resolved into something unmistakably human. A girl appeared in the seat, sitting perfectly still. Even in grainy black and white, I recognized her immediately. The posture, the hair, the eyes wide and unblinking. The camera didn't show her face clearly, but I knew. I felt it in my bones. The man leaned forward. "Huh, that's weird." "She wasn't there before," I said, my voice shaking. He didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the screen. The footage continued, and something even stranger became clear. Every few seconds, the camera skipped. Not forward, not backward, sideways, like time itself was stuttering around her. Whenever the image stabilized, she was still there, still unblinking, still facing directly toward the camera, toward me. Then the screen froze. The timestamp continued counting, but the image didn't change. The man tried rewinding. The system refused. He tried switching cameras.
Every feed went black at once, the room filled with the hum of the monitor and the sound of my own breathing. When the screens finally came back on, the footage had reset. The girl was gone. The seat was empty again. According to the system logs, nothing unusual had happened. The man laughed nervously. "Must have been a software hiccup," he said, though his hands were shaking slightly. "You didn't see anything, right?" I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the paused frame the man hadn't seen. Reflected faintly in the glass of the classroom window behind the camera's view was a pair of eyes, not the girl's, mine, wide, unblinking, staring straight into the lens. I ran. That night, I dreamed of cameras, hundreds of them, watching, recording, never blinking. And somewhere in the dark between the frames, she waited, patient, silent, and closer than ever.
After what I saw in the security office, I stopped trusting my senses. Or maybe I trusted them too much. Every reflection felt suspicious. Every shadow seemed to linger longer than it should. I started blinking on purpose, exaggerating it like some kind of nervous tic. Blink, blink again, just to be sure I still could. My eyes ached constantly, but the pain was comforting. Pain meant I was still in control. The next day, the classroom felt different the moment I stepped inside. The air was heavier, like it had been sealed in overnight. The seat by the window was empty again, just like everyone insisted it always was. I sat down slowly, heart hammering, and forced myself not to look at it. I focused on my notebook, on my breathing, on anything else. The lecture started. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe it was over. Then, the teacher stopped talking. The silence wasn't sudden. It crept in, swallowing his voice mid-sentence. I looked up. His mouth was still moving, but no sound came out. Around me, students froze in place, pens hovering above paper, faces slack and empty. The buzzing fluorescent lights dimmed, their hum stretching into a low, distorted whine. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I was the only one who could move. I knew, without looking, that she was there. The pressure behind my eyes returned instantly, sharper than before. My vision tunneled, dark creeping in at the edges. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me not to, I turned my head toward the window. She was sitting in the seat, closer this time. Her chair had been pulled forward, reducing the distance between us by half. Her hands were still folded, but her fingers were longer than I remembered, bending slightly in the wrong places. Her eyes were open, impossibly wide now, veins spiderwebbing across the whites. They were locked onto me with an intensity that made my stomach churn. She still hadn't blinked. Neither had I. The room around her didn't look right. The edges of her form bled into the background, like a poorly edited photograph. The longer I stared, the more I noticed subtle inconsistencies. Her shadow pointed the wrong direction. The reflection in the window behind her didn't match her movements. Reality seemed to bend around her presence, like it couldn't quite agree on how she should exist. She stood up. No chair scraped the floor, no sound at all. She simply rose, her feet never quite touching the ground. As she moved toward me, the classroom stretched, the walls pulling away like rubber. Each step she took felt like it echoed inside my head rather than the room. My eyes burned, tears streamed down my face. I wanted to blink, I needed to blink, but something held my eyelids apart, an invisible force stronger than fear. Her face was inches from mine now. Up close, I saw things I hadn't before. Her pupils weren't round, they were elongated, vertical, like a cat's or a reptile's. Within them, images flickered rapidly, too fast to fully process. Faces, rooms, eyes staring back, thousands of moments compressed into a single, endless gaze. Her mouth opened wider than human anatomy should allow, and when she finally spoke, it wasn't with sound. Reality breaks when observed too long. The classroom snapped back into place. Sound rushed in all at once, voices shuffling, the teacher's lecture resuming exactly where it had stopped. I gasped and blinked hard, collapsing forward onto my desk. Someone laughed nearby, assuming I'd just dozed off. My heart raced so fast I thought it might tear itself apart. I looked toward the window. The seat was empty. At lunch, I checked my phone. No missed time, no glitch. According to every clock and record, nothing unusual had happened. But when I opened my camera app, the screen flickered. For a split second, I saw her reflected behind me, standing far too close. I dropped the phone and blinked. The reflection was gone.
What I noticed at the end of that night didn't scare me immediately. That happened after, in part 2.